Heya! Thanks for checking out the VR backpack and interaction system. In this video, I'm going to go through the 7 easy steps to get this system working with the UE5 template. This is just an example setup, but should be very similar to how you would implement the system in your own game. Feel free to skip to any individual part if that's what you need help with, but they're designed to be done in order. If you have any other questions or queries, make sure to join our Discord, which will be linked in the description below. Enjoy! Okay, so I'm just going to show you how to add the actual backpack component to the pawn so you can begin using the backpack and interaction system. So we're just in the UE5 template here, and the default pawn for this is called VR pawn, which you can see here. That's inside Content, Template, Blueprints. So we can open that up, and then at the top left are all the current components of the pawn. We can use this add button to search for BPC backpack component. That blueprint can be found back over here if you'd like to have a deeper look. Okay, so now that's added, let's add the basic functionality to use it. So let's grab a reference to the backpack component and we'll use backpack button pressed function. For our purposes, we're just going to steal the input from the menu as that's all set up for whichever VR headset you're using. Now if I compile and press play on that, if I press that menu button, voila, we have a backpack opening and closing for us. So now what we want to do is actually be able to add some objects to the backpack. Now this template already has the ability to pick up and hold objects and stores them in these variables held component right and held component left. So what we're going to do is use these so that the player can add the item that they are holding to the backpack. So here I'm going to get a reference to held component right, get held component right, and what I want to do is I want to check whether or not this is actually valid or not, which is basically whether or not the player is holding onto something in their right hand or not. So if they are holding something, what we want to do is we want to run the backpack button press function, but we want to send the thing that they're holding to the backpack. So I'm going to get the owner, which is basically the thing that's being held, and send that into the backpack button pressed function. Now if the held component is not valid, I want to run the same function, but with just the held actor not set at all. Basically what this means now is that if I'm holding something, it will be put into the backpack, and if I'm not, the backpack will instead open, which is what happens if you don't send an object. Okay, so I'll revision our pawn here so we're a little closer, and I'll try to put something into the backpack. But, oh no, we must have only interactable object going into the backpack. So up next, let's create some interactable objects. Okay, so we want to create some interactable objects so that we actually have some things to put into the backpack. So what we're going to do is we're going to actually convert these cubes out here into interactable objects so we can put them into and take them out of our backpack. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up this cube here and we're going to convert it into an interactable object. So you can see we have a pretty basic blueprint here. It's just a static mesh and a grab component. The grab component allows us to pick up and drop the static mesh. So what I need to do is I need to reparent this to interactable object base. And that blueprint is in here in backpack system blueprints interactable object base. Any object you want to put into the backpack must be a child of this blueprint class. Okay, so I go over here to class settings, go to parent class, and just type in interactable object base, and that just does the reparenting. Now that the cube is an interactable object, we'll get some new things pop up over here in the components window. The only thing we need to do is get rid of the old static mesh. So we'll just copy across any settings we have on the mesh itself, and then once we've done that, we can just delete that class or that component. Perfect. Okay, so that's all done. And now we have interactable objects. So if I go over here now and press play, I should be able to pick these up. And you can see the particle system is working, which is a feature of the interactable object base. Now if I press the menu button, it will go into my backpack. So if I open my backpack up, there it is inside my backpack. Excellent. The backpack system also comes with a highlight feature, which allows the player to see the items that are interactable. At the moment, you can see that whilst we have the particle system activating, there's no highlighting. To set this up, we're going to need to use a post-process volume. So to add one, I need to go up here and click on Window, and then I click the Place Actors tab here. Now go across to Volumes, and scroll down to Post-Process Volume. I'm going to add one of those to my level. Awesome. So I'm just going to chuck this over here, so it's out of the way. And I'm going to set it to unbound eventually, so it doesn't matter that it's just over to the side. Okay, so go down here to Properties, and I need to scroll down to Rendering Features, Post-Process Materials. Excellent. And I'm going to click Add Element. And I'm going to set that as an asset reference. Now the asset reference that I want to make is in here, in Backpack System, Extras, Highlight Materials. And I want to add the outliner instance to the post-process volume. Excellent. Cool. Now what I've done that, the other thing I want to do is the same as what I've done before, what I was saying before. I'm going to set this to have an unbound extent, or infinite extent, unbound, so it applies to the whole level. And I also need to just make it so it always spawns to create anything weird happening where it doesn't, the volume won't spawn. Okay, now with that all set up, if I go out and press play, you can see the cube now has a highlight along with the particles. So I'll pick all these up. You can see the highlight works on all of them. I place them all into my backpack. And now if I open up my backpack, you can see that the current item that I'm interacting with in the backpack also has the highlight, which is excellent. Okay, so sure would be good if we could actually scroll through the backpack and choose what we want to get out of it. Let's go back into the VR pawn and set up some input to be able to scroll through the backpack. We'll move this over here to start with, so we can see exactly what we've added and what's come with the template. First things first, we want to add a reference to the backpack component, and then run the scroll through backpack function. This function is basically set up to work with your VR joystick. So if it receives an integer greater than 0.5, it will scroll to the right, and less than negative 0.5, it will scroll to the left. But we're going to need input for this. So let's go create our own. So I jump back out, go to the VR template folder, input, and we'll go to this input map here called IMC default. So there's a whole bunch of actions here, which are mapped to different VR headsets, and we're going to create and add our own. But to do that, we're actually going to need an action. So let's go create our own. So we'll head back out to the input folder and go into actions. And we can see all the input actions are already created as part of this template. For our purposes, IA turn is almost identical to the one we're going to want to make. So we'll just make a copy of it. And we're going to name it scroll through backpack. So if I go into this now, there's almost nothing I need to change except for the description, which is not essential, but is recommended. Awesome. So with that done, I can go back now to the IMC default, and I can add my input action, scroll through backpack. Once I've done that, I need to add the various VR headsets inputs to this action so that I can know that it knows what to do. I've added a whole bunch of dummies here for the 4 different headsets which come with a template or programmed in with a template. There's been the Valve, the Oculus, the Vive, and the mixed reality. Okay, with all of those added now, we can head back to the VR pawn and add our input. So I right click here and I search for my scroll through backpack input. I hook the action value into the rotation, direction, and strength, and the triggered value into the scroll through backpack. I head back out, I press run. Now if I place some things into my backpack and open up the backpack, I can now scroll through the backpack using my joystick. Adding more things still works. Awesome. Okay, so we want to add the logic for actually getting objects out of the backpack. First thing to do is to open up the VR pawn again, which is just here inside of blueprints inside of VR pawn. We've been putting all of our edited blueprints over here, so we'll just continue that and we'll grab the input for the right hand and put it over there. We're going to basically hook this up so that when we grab, we'll automatically grab whatever object we currently have selected in the backpack. First thing we need to do is check whether or not the backpack is open. So we get a reference to the backpack component and then the backpack open boolean. So basically now if this isn't open, what we want to do is do what we usually do. And if it is open, we want to run this function called retrieve current item from backpack. So I get another reference to the backpack component. Find retrieve current item from backpack function. Okay, so now we have the currently selected item. Let's place it in the hand. To place it in the hand, we're going to need the location of the motion controller. So we'll get the reference to the motion controller right, and we'll get its world location. Now once we have this, we don't want its exact location because we want the object to look more natural in the hand. So I'll just add on to this vector, and this is just me made it up. I'm just testing different numbers, which I just add 7 onto the X and I add 5 onto the Y. So once we've got that vector now, we're going to place our received item at that location by using the setActorLocation function. Okay, so now with the item placed correctly, we just need to make the hand grab it. First, we make sure that the object can be grabbed by checking that it has a grab component. So I'm just going to redirect this down under here so it looks a little bit nicer. And with this reference to the item, I'm going to run this function here. Get component by class. And just check if it has a grab component class. Excellent. If it has a grab component, then we know that we can run on this grab component, we can run the try grab function. So for the try grab function, we need the motion controller and the grab component. Not on the motion controller, so try grab is on the grab component, but it needs a reference to the motion controller like that. There we go. Okay, so I'll pipe that in. If it is valid, we'll try grab, and that's basically just making the hand grab the item which is at that location. Awesome. If I do successfully grab, then all I got to do now is just set this variable up here, which is going to be the held component right. So I'm going to set this, which is just a variable that here on this VR pawn, which is basically just a reference to the currently held item, and we're just going to set that to be the currently held item, or the grab component of the currently held item. After that, we're just going to pipe this back into here, which is just a little error check thing from the template, which just checks if you've passed an item from one hand to the other. So we'll run that again anyway at the end. If we test this now, we can see that if I put an item into the backpack, I can indeed take it back out. There we go. And I've got it back out, but this floating thing is a bit weird. So it'd be nice, we could just reactivate physics when we take it out, but what we like to do, or what this template actually has, is allows the objects to float back to where they originally started. So we go back down to this on release, and after we've successfully released, which is what this branch here is, I'm going to go reference to the backpack component. I'm going to make the item that was released return back to its original transform. So get the held, or the item that I've just released is still in held component right, because I haven't got rid of that reference yet. Get its owner, which is an interactable object. Return to original transform, which is just an interface function on those items. So that will now mean that when I release the item, it will return back to its original transform because it is an interactable object. So if I go back in here, put some items in the backpack, open up the backpack, cycle through, that all still works, let that go, you can see it returns back to its original transform, which is very cool. Physics automatically reactivates on that as well. You can change that. Perfect. So we finally have a fully working backpack. What if you have some skeletal meshes you want to put in, like this gun? Well, there's a couple of extra steps to get a blueprint with a skeletal mesh working, which I'll show you how to do. First things first, we'll need to open up the blueprint for this gun, which is called Pistol. And we'll do the exact same thing that we did with the cube and reparent this to be the interactable object base class. Now this is going to add some inherited components over on the left side here. Keep this hierarchy as it's important that the particles stay on the static mesh and the grab component, anything else stays on the skeletal mesh. We do need to set this static mesh though. So if we go into the skeletal mesh and open up our skeletal mesh, we can make a static mesh, which is pretty easy. And then once we've made that, we can go back and we can set that on our static mesh in our pistol blueprint. So we'll save this into mesh and we'll just name it pistol. There we go. And we head back now into the pistol blueprint and click on our static mesh. We can set the static mesh to be the pistol, the new static mesh pistol. Now we didn't save that, so I might go back out and just click save on that. Awesome. Now, as we're not going to be using this static mesh at all in the actual game, let's make it completely invisible and static. So we'll go down and turn off everything in physics and collision. So that's no collision, and just turn all that off. Now, one thing that's really important is that we need to go down and we want to set visible to false. Okay, so with all that done, we're ready to go. So if I go back out and press play, save this first, and then press play, I should now be able to pick up my gun. I should see the highlights and the particles working on it, which I do. Excellent. If I press the backpack button now to put it in the backpack, you can see it's going into the backpack. There it is. I can get it out of the backpack and all the functionality still works. Perfect.